To the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee hearing today. For the record, I'm Chair Delegate Jazz Lewis. It's good to see you all. It's a cold day. Appreciate you coming out here in person. We are going to start with the State Treasurer's Office this afternoon. So, Micah, if you can come and give the DLS analysis. If there's any questions for him, we will take that. And then, Mr. Treasurer, good to see you, my brother. We'll have you up here for your testimony. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Micah Richards, and I want to thank the chair of the committee in the great state of Maryland for allowing me to speak before you today. I am presenting the State Treasurer's Fiscal 26 Budget Analysis. Starting on page 1, the State Treasurer is responsible for the management and protection of state funds and property. The fiscal 26 budget increases by around $6 million to $116 million. On page 2 and 3, Exhibit 1 shows the overview of fiscal 26 spending. $74 million is the majority of the allowance to support insurance premiums. On page 3 and 4, Exhibit 2 shows the budget change for fiscal 26 compared to fiscal 25. The largest spending increase of around $10 million in reimbursable funds is due to the higher cost of insurance premiums. The largest decrease is the Financial Systems Modernization IT project, decreasing from $5 million to $0. On page 5, as of December 2024, 3 positions are vacant. On page 6, the Maryland 529 has 3 arms: Maryland Prepaid College Trust, the Maryland Saves for College Program, and Maryland Achieving a Better Life Experience Program, referred to as ABLE. The fiscal 26 gives around $15 million to the Maryland 529 program. As of June 30th, 2024, Maryland ABLE average account balance is over $14,000, which is higher than the national average by around $4,000. As of October 1st, 2024, the ABLE program reached $100 million in assets under management for 6,800 Marylanders. Chapter 173 of 2024 required local schools to present information about the ABLE program to parents, which increased the transparency with the public. The state treasurer became the administrator of the Prepaid College Trust on June 1st, 2023, and they are only serving existing account holders. As of June 30th, 2024, around 27,000 accounts remain. The Prepaid College Trust lets individuals prepay for college tuition at current rates that they can use to cover tuition and fees for their children when they go to college. The state treasurer has implemented the 4-phase policy change to reform the Prepaid College Trust, including establishing a 6% retroactive earnings rate on historical account balances, updated the automatic record-keeping system, which is the online portal, to reflect the new account balances, established the parameters for claims stemming from the November 2021 disclosure statement change, and set the earnings rate at 0% to stop the accrual of new interest on the Prepaid College Trust account balances. DLS requests for the state treasurer to provide a status update on the implementation of the 4-phase programmatic policy changes. On page 7 and 8, Save for College State Contribution Program that provides flexible and affordable 529 plans to help Maryland families save for future education expenses and reduce dependence on student loans. Exhibit 3 shows the total number of program applications in fiscal 24 was around 30,000, an increase of 5% compared to fiscal 23. The number of eligible applicants who received a state contribution in fiscal 24 was around 20,000, an increase of 5% compared to fiscal 23. In Baltimore City, the number of applicants receiving a state contribution in fiscal '24 was around 3,000, a decrease of 11% compared to fiscal '23. In Prince George's County, the number of applicants receiving a state contribution in fiscal '24 was around 1,000, a small increase of 2% compared to fiscal '23. On page 9, Exhibit 4 shows the number of applicants from low-income households who received a contribution in fiscal '24 was around 6,000, a significant increase of 111% compared to fiscal '23. The number of unique beneficiaries in fiscal '24 was around 17,000, an increase of 6% compared to fiscal '23. The average contribution is on a downward trend, decreasing by 36% from fiscal 2020 to fiscal 2024. On page 10, Exhibit 5 shows in fiscal '24 compared to fiscal '23, television advertising increased by around 5 million views. The radio advertising listeners decreased by 29%. The new users to the Maryland 529 website decreased by 37%. And the digital advertising, like social media, had an increase of 400,000 views. On page 11 and 12, Exhibit 6 shows that from fiscal 20 to fiscal 24, the return on the state investment portfolio fluctuated. In fiscal 24, there was a 0.3 percentage point decrease compared to fiscal 23 in the return on the state's investment portfolio. In fiscal 23, interest rates increased to counteract inflation, and the investment portfolio size grew with significant returns. Therefore, DLS requests for the state treasurer to comment on the reasons for why the return on the state's investment portfolio decreased in fiscal 24. Prior to the June 24 GO bond sale, Maryland received AAA bond ratings from all three major rating agencies. However, Moody's Investor Service changed Maryland's outlook from stable to negative. The reasons cited were projected structural budget deficits and anticipated reductions in general fund reserves. DLS requests for the state treasurer to discuss the most recent GO bond ratings, including actions that it is taking so the Maryland GO bonds are no longer rated with a negative outlook. On page 13, DLS recommends for the state treasurer to concur with the governor's allowance. On page 14, the financial systems modernization is the major IT project whose goal is to replace the core financial interface and insurance management system with a modern treasury management system and insurance management system. This enables the state treasurer to disperse funds. The objective is to implement a cloud-based system designed to enhance business and technology processes, primary in the insurance, accounting, and treasury management divisions. The project is expected to experience production delays due to the state treasurer's project staff sharing their time with multiple agency projects. The cost increased by around $182,000 in fiscal 25 compared to fiscal 24, and the cost decreases by around $546,000 in fiscal 26 compared to fiscal 25. The estimated completion date has been extended to fiscal 27. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Micah. Colleagues, any questions? DLS? Seeing none, Mr. Treasurer, you or any staff that want to approach, you can begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. First of all, thank you all very much for this opportunity to come present the Office of the State Treasurer's budget. I appreciate this opportunity. To my right is the Chief Deputy, Jonathan Martin. You all have the written testimony that goes into much greater detail, so I'm going to present just a few highlights and comment on some of the things that were raised in the analysis. First of all, a special note of thanks to Mr. Richards and the Department of Legislative Services for their very thoughtful and thorough analysis of our agency. We certainly appreciate all the insights. And for the reasons that I will discuss now, I would respectfully request that you concur in DLS's recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance. Last year when I came before you, I said that 2024 was a year of growth for the State Treasurer's Office. By all measures, 2025 was a year of progress. In fiscal year 21, in 2021, the office had 60 employees and a 35% vacancy rate. Today, the office has roughly 100 employees and a 3% vacancy rate. While there is a lot that I am proud of and would want to highlight in our time together, the DLS analysis requested updates on 3 specific aspects of the work that my team does. So I will take each of these in turn. The first topic that the DLS analysis asked about was the Maryland Prepaid College Trust. When you all reelected me as State Treasurer in 2023, I offered to assist with Maryland 529 if given the resources and time. You made it very clear in your directive to me was to fix the problems facing the Maryland Prepaid College Trust. Our written testimony provides an overview of the progress that we have made to implement 4 phases of policy change. Suffice it to say that since taking over the program, the State Treasurer's Office has restored account holders access to their full balances, honored the commitment to provide 6% retroactive earnings, established a process that received over 3,300 claims, and set the earnings rate to 0% for prepaid accounts. While the transition presented a number of challenges, we have diligently implemented the policy changes needed to open a new chapter for the Maryland Prepaid College Trust. In this new chapter, my team and I will administer the program as responsibly as we can, as long as it remains viable. Beyond the Maryland 529 program, the DLS analysis requested an explanation of returns on the state investment portfolio. In particular, the analysis noted that the returns on the portfolio were down 0.3% in fiscal year 24. This is for several reasons, including the overall size of the portfolio, which was smaller, and changing interest rates and market conditions. However, the portfolio's return continued to be higher than historic returns and are on track with current Bureau of Revenue estimates. If I can stay there for a second, Mr. Chairman, I think what needs to be noted also, prior to my assuming office, generally we were doing about $50 million a year in interest return. The past few years since we've been here under the leadership of Mr. Keith Morris, we have been bringing in $300 million a year. We're good, but trying to keep up that pace year over year is challenging. So that's what we meant by we're still higher than historic rates, and we're still on track to meet Bureau of Revenue estimates. It's we were down a little bit, but the bottom line is we're still, compared against historic numbers, we're still doing about a 5- or 6-fold increase. Moving forward, the third and final topic that DLS asked about is the state's most recent bond rating. Listen, it's no secret that the state is facing turbulent times. That was discussed in depth yesterday at the State of the State. Maryland has held the highest ratings from all 3 major rating agencies since the agencies began issuing ratings. The state has retained its AAA bond rating during the last credit review in May of 2024. At that time, however, Moody's assigned the state a negative outlook based on three main factors. The first is the pension liability and above-average debt burden. The second is vulnerability to shifts in federal spending. And third is projected budget deficits, state budget deficits. Shortly before the last bond sale, I coordinated a meeting with other fiscal leaders and representatives from the rating agencies. Governor Moore, President Ferguson, Speaker Jones, and others spoke to the group and demonstrated one of the state's greatest strengths, its fiscal stewardship. The meeting came on the heels of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. All of the public officials who participated shared a unified message. Maryland does not shy away from its challenges. Instead, we approach them head on and as a team. This is not the first time that the state has been assigned a negative outlook. In 2011, in the midst of the extended federal shutdown, Moody's assigned Maryland a negative outlook for a period of time before restoring the stable outlook. In the current moment, while the solution to the structural deficit is still being identified, communication is key. My staff has been keeping in close contact with the rating agencies to share updates as the budget is being finalized. We are hopeful that the state's history of prudent fiscal management, coupled with our institutional protections like the Capital Debt Affordability Committee and your plan for the fiscal 2026 budget, will help the state retain its AAA bond rating. I would be happy to serve as a resource to you all as you consider solutions and set Maryland on a course for clearer waters. It has been a pleasure seeing you today and sharing updates on behalf of the State Treasurer's Office, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. College, do you all have any questions? Seeing none, I appreciate seeing you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Have a good one. All right, now we are going to transition to the Police and Correctional Training Commission. So we will start with Ms. Barber, come up to do the DLS analysis, and then Secretary Scruggs, you and your team can then approach. Ms. Barber, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Barber, and today I will be presenting the fiscal 26 budget for the Police and Correctional Training Commissions, or PCTC. PCTC provides staffing and administrative services to two commissions, the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, MPTSC, and the Maryland Correctional Training Commission, CTC. MPTSC sets the minimum selection and training standards for police officers, while CTC sets them for parole and probation, juvenile justice, and correctional personnel. The fiscal 26 budget for PCTC totals $13.7 million, which is a $1.3 million increase, or 10.3% from last year. Exhibit 1 on page 3 displays the fiscal 26 allowance categorized by major spending areas. 60% is dedicated to personnel costs for instructors and administration at approximately $8.3 million. An additional $2 million in special funds, or 15%, is included in the budget from the MPTSC fund to provide resources to enhance law enforcement training and support commission activities. The fiscal 26 allowance increases by approximately $1.3 million compared to the working appropriation. Exhibit 2 on page 4 shows this change itemized by expense type. The single largest change is an increase of $1.4 million for personnel costs. Moving on to personnel. The fiscal 26 allowance provides 78 regular positions, of which 12.2 are transferred from other divisions of DPSCS. DPSCS should discuss the sources and purpose of these transferred positions. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows PCTC vacancies per month. As of December 31st, 2024, there were 13 vacant positions, more than 4 times the 3 vacancies reported in January 2024. However, according to DPSCS, 7 of these vacancies were filled as of January 8, 2025. Despite the upward trajectory of vacancies in fiscal 25, turnover expectancy decreases from 6.45% in fiscal 25 to 5.33% in fiscal 26. DPSCS reported that PCTC has faced recruitment challenges, especially in calendar 24, due to a lack of qualified candidates or just candidates who were accepting other positions. DPSCS also stated that its priorities in calendar 24 were to recruit mandated positions for correctional officers and parole and probation officers, which led to delays in PCTC recruitment. The issue I'd like to highlight today is a proposed transfer of the MPTSC fund balance by the end of fiscal 2025. This fund receives $2 million each year through special court fees and historically has not been utilized at a rate that matches its growth, which has resulted in a significant fund balance. Before fiscal 2024, the agency had used the MPTSC fund for a few items, but was slow to expend resources, spending less than $750,000 between fiscal 2019 and 2023, which left a starting fund balance of $9.6 million in fiscal 2024. In response to consistent underutilization of the fund, the BRFA of 2024 expanded the allowable uses of the fund in fiscal 24 and 25 only to include correctional training and equipment needs. At the same time, language in the fiscal 24 budget required PCTC to provide a spending strategy to address oversight and underspending issues. In fiscal 24, PCTC reported increased expenditures of $2.4 million. However, $2 million of that was due to a transfer of funds to support other PCTC functions. Language in the fiscal 25 budget requested an updated spending plan and timeline. As of August 1st, 2024, the updated plan anticipated that total spending for fiscal 2025 would be $4.2 million. However, the working appropriation only includes $2.7 million in special funds, meaning an additional appropriation would be necessary to meet the spending goal. DPSCS should provide the total amount of MPTSC funding expended in fiscal 25 to date and discuss which of the planned expenditures are being prioritized. The BRFA of 2025, as introduced, includes a provision that authorizes the governor to transfer up to $7 million from the fund to the general fund by the end of fiscal 25. This is illustrated in Exhibit 4 on page 9. If PCTC expends the full $2.7 million in the MPTSC appropriation for fiscal 2025, the transfer would reduce the fiscal 26 starting balance from $8.3 million to $1.3 million. Prior to the proposed fund balance transfer, the strategic spending plan estimated that the fund would expend approximately $3.8 million in fiscal 2026. These expenditures would include building a simulation training environment, maintaining the training and oversight database and software, hosting guest speakers, hiring adjunct faculty and a training coordinator, and providing annual training for staff. As a result of the fund balance transfer proposed in the BRFA, project outlined in the spending strategy may face delays beginning in fiscal 2025. Given that expenditures in fiscal 2026 through 2028 may exceed the available fund balance and appropriation in those years, a new spending strategy appears necessary. DPSCS should discuss a new timeline and plan for initiatives supported with the MPTSC fund. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
There you go. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Barber? Seeing none, thank you very much. Secretary Scruggs and team, you all can approach. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Lewis, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today are Joseph Sadal, Deputy Secretary of Administration, Executive Director Kate Gossett, and Executive Director Wayne Silva. The department, as well as both commissions, appreciates the collaboration with the Department of Legislative Services and Ms. Barbara's hard work on this analysis. The department would also like to offer a thank you to our DBM analyst, Christina Hoye-Tunyon, for the advice and guidance that she has provided during this budget submission. Again, as a long-term employee with this department, I'm honored to be here today testifying not just on the budget, but on behalf of the dedicated staff and hardworking professionals who come to work every day and uphold the mission of protecting the public, its employees, detainees, and offenders under our supervision. The department operates the Public Safety Education and Training Center, a large training complex located in Sykesville, Maryland, comprising classroom and administrative space, a training center, driver training facility, firearms training facility, a scenario-based training building. The department also houses the Police Training and Standards Commission and the Correctional Training Commission. In my capacity as secretary, I am the chair of the Correctional Training Commission, and the department supports each commission with finance, procurement, human resources, and other related administrative functions. In the analysis, the Department of Legislative Services asked the department to respond to 3 issues. The first issue the department asked to comment on are the sources and purpose of the additional positions that were transferred. The FY26 allowance includes 12 additional positions that were transferred to the Police and Correctional Training Commission for other divisions within the department in FY 2024. 9 of these PINs were transferred as part of the department's ongoing effort to convert contractual positions into permanent merit roles, ensuring workforce stability and compliance with personnel standards. 2 of the PINs were utilized to bolster the certification and compliance unit and an assistant director for law enforcement training. These transfers are part of the strategic initiative to strengthen PCTC's role in developing and retaining a highly qualified public safety workforce. These reallocated positions help address long-term staffing needs as well. The second issue we were asked to comment on is the total amount of MPTSC's funding expended in FY25 to date and discuss prioritization of planned expenditures. The FY25 year-to-date expenses of the MPTSC fund are over $135,000, and the encumbrances are nearly $600,000. FY25 features over $3 million in approved planned spending that has yet to be encumbered. One of the Commission's prioritized expenditures is the Multiple Interactive Learning Objective System, which can be used to improve decision-making skills while incorporating de-escalation response for police and correctional officers. The Commission has also recently allocated funds to purchase advanced trauma simulators, which will be used to provide realistic training environments involving medical trauma that a police officer may encounter. Ongoing priorities for the remainder of the FY25 outlined in the strategic plan also include new instructional training initiatives, additional speakers for the 2-speaker series program, and professional development for staff. The speaker series will focus on program development involving leadership and wellness. Additional approved projects include physical agility equipment, 2-way radio replacement for police training, and the first phase of renovations to the dedicated Commission meeting room. You can find a brief summary of each plan prioritization expenditure for FY25 in the written testimony I submitted, as well as the strategic plan outlined in the JCR response on the Police Training Standards Commission fund spending and timeline. The last issue we were asked to comment on is the new timeline and plan for initiatives supported with the MPTSC fund. The Joint Chairman's report submitted in August of 2024 provides a revised timeline and details of specific initiatives and planned expenditures of the fund through FY28. The strategic plan identifies both short and long-term initiatives with a focus on addressing gaps and improving law enforcement training. The plan was developed based on the annual fiscal appropriation of $2 million and accrued interest. As a living document, the plan is reviewed annually with staff and the Police Training and Standards Commission to assess progress in meeting the Commission's goals and objectives for the current and upcoming fiscal years. The Commission also considers legislative updates, mandated training, and new trends in law enforcement that may require shifting priorities in our timeline. Annual fixed expenditures must also be included. The proposed budget reductions will delay the implementation of the capital construction project for the scenario-based simulation training environment. Several projects are on-time funding expenses, but many are ongoing programs that rely on funding allocations being rolled out into future fiscal years, such as classroom technology upgrades, capital projects, the Innovation and Design Center, and the curriculum development and revision. Once the department is approved, a final adjustment will be made to the strategic plan timeline. In conclusion, I am truly proud of the training and initiatives designed to support the public safety professionals here in Maryland, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Colleagues, do you have any questions for the Secretary? All right, well, I do. Is that a surprise? First, I wanted to start by saying that the use of a virtual reality-like system, I think, is going to be very beneficial, and I applaud you all for doing that. You know, in a lighthearted sense, I'm in the Washington suburbs. Anyone who watches football know that it was very effective for our quarterback. But in all seriousness, it allows people to test scenarios long before they're there under every circumstances so that they can respond effectively. And if it's good for our warfighter, it should be good for those who are serving some of the hardest jobs for us. So kudos. I know you, as you were talking, you were referencing delays. I just want to know if is there any timetable to those delays that you could reference for us to
So
start?
Kate, you want to talk to the timelines?
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Gossard. I'm the Executive Director for the Public Safety Education and Training Center. This strategic plan outlines our long-term goals in addition to our short-term goals, but one of those is the capital project for the scenario-based learning environment. That is estimated approximately at $6 million per DGS. They are currently reviewing vendors for the architectural and engineering plan. So if that fund is reduced, we anticipate that project will be completely put on hold until funds can be accrued for a balance necessary for that construction project to move forward. That environment is critical to our training needs, we feel, based on the scenario-based learning initiatives we have with public safety officers, and it was part of the original concept for our training center. So we hope to move forward with it, and with this fund, we should be able to.
And another question is, it relates to body-worn cameras, not the, I know there's an ongoing conversation with ASME on the correctional side. This is actually on the police side. When we, we mandated all public-facing law enforcement to have body-worn camera programs. The training is through the commission and whatnot. I used to be a member of that for some time, a couple of years. Can you give any update as to how the various police departments are utilizing the program? I think when I left it, they were all standing up their programs at the time to get in compliance with state law.
Thank you, Delegate. My name is Wayne Silver. I'm the Executive Director of the Police Training and Standards Commission. Most of the departments throughout the state are moving forward. What the commission has done is we have a model program that they follow. We also brief on that program, not just to the law enforcement agencies, but also to the administrative charging committees who are tasked with reviewing that body-worn camera footage. It's been a very positive program for law enforcement. The biggest issue that especially smaller departments are facing is, as you're aware, Delegate, is the storage and the retention of the data. So traditionally, most agencies hold the data for about 4 years at a time. But it's been a very positive program, and almost every day more and more departments are coming online.
That's great to hear. I know now there's a lot of software that people will use to try to help screen some of that, at least to limit, it won't limit the storage costs, but may limit the pulling officers off the field to just review hours and hours of footage from different angles. I don't know if we have updated any of that standing language to suggest them since I would say the development of a lot of these AI tools to try to help with screening. I don't know if you can respond to that, but I'd be interested because I know there's some software out there now to that effect.
There is some software available. We actually have a few individuals from the commission going to a training program to kind of get updated on that software. It's out there. As far as the review of the data, I do know that artificial intelligence is starting to come into play. And what that will do is they'll use the artificial intelligence to identify any anomalies in the body-worn camera footage. But at the end of the day, you ultimately are still going to have a human factor with it, where a supervisor or the officer themselves or a state's attorney is still going to use some resources to review that body-worn camera footage.
I was hoping you would say that. That is very much appreciated. Okay, colleagues, any further questions for them? Delegate McComas.
Several years ago, a number of us had an opportunity to go to Aberdeen Proving Ground to see their simulation for the troops. And I was wondering if you have had an opportunity maybe to see where other simulations are in the military that can help you with your purchase of the simulator for I guess it's for the folks that are the guards in the correctional institutions, as well as possibly the parole and probation folks that go out to the individual, check on the folks that are on parole or probation at their residence. So.
Actually, ma'am, I'm very familiar with how the military and the Department of Defense, as well as other federal entities, have developed these type of programs. The number one thing we have to do, and this is why it has to be large enough that it's going to have enough different scenario areas where it can be used for different things, different facets, different things that both a correction officer or a parole and probation officer or a police officer may run into. But it also has to be in a controlled environment. Because one of the biggest concerns when you use one of these type of simulated environments is that it's safety, that there are no weapons in, so you have to have control of getting in, getting out. You have to have cameras, which not only make sure everything's safe, but what it also does is it allows you to take that footage and go back after the fact, and the student can actually watch a video of what happened. In addition to the body-worn camera, they'll see a different view of it. And the instructor can sit down with them and critique exactly what went well, perhaps what they could work on. So yes, we have taken all that into account to make sure that when we do build this environment, it is state-of-the-art and meets the best practices of the federal government as well as our law enforcement partners.
Kind of following on that line, I was actually going to follow up on that with, so University of Maryland had a program out of their sociology department led by a professor named Dr. Rashawn Ray, who ran a series of simulations with their computer science department with Prince George's County Police Department, where they had an effort to have different virtual reality scenarios to prepare law enforcement for things they may see in the field, but also with an intentional effort to build empathy with the communities. And I think in their case, they also put on equipment so that officers could simulate what it feels like to be someone who was pulled over by them, for example. And, you know, while it may become second nature to someone who's in the force, you know, kind of for a moment to, you know, I think it was like a chest plate was put on them that would tense their chest within some reasonable, you don't want to cause cardiac arrest for anyone, but like within some reasonable amount. So you can be like, oh, you know, just my presence could inspire some degree of tension, possibly even fear. You know, I wonder, as you all are looking for all the various scenarios, is there any functionality for something like that to try to, not necessarily that specifically, but building empathy for the people who might have to interact with them, that would give our officers the best training to help set the scene when they do their job?
So we actually already do some of that. What we do is we have a program, some of you may be familiar with, called Hearing Voices, where we train officers how to deal with individuals in crisis, and then we basically put them in their shoes, where they have to perform routine tasks while they are hearing voices in their head, so they can understand, as you say, the other side of the coin of what these folks are dealing with. In addition to that, with using the virtual reality system, one of the benefits of doing that is more traditional simulated environments, the officer kind of knows what they're going into. For example, if I have to put on a bunch of safety gear because we're going to use paint markers, well, I'm pretty sure at some point I'm going to draw my gun and shoot or be shot at. With these, the scenario can be very complex, where they can respond to anything. So it starts to build better files with them. So when they go to training, they're not automatically thinking there's one way to fix this. And they can start to look at it from a perspective of, can I de-escalate? Do I have discretionary time to do this? And they can use more of the tools they have in their toolbox to do that. So yeah, we're looking at that. I'm not familiar with the research that was done at University of Maryland, but we can certainly look at it.
That'd be great. Yeah, I would encourage you all to have some conversation with Dr. Sean Ray. Maybe he can assist in some manner. And what you're doing is very inspiring as well. One final question for me, which is, it relates to some of the funding that, you know, has been going over there. And I know, Madam Secretary, you spoke to it a little bit, of the $2 million that's been coming. I think you all have a strategy of how we are going to address some of that. But if you could just elaborate a little bit more, just because, as everyone is aware, we are in a funding crunch, and any fund balances, you know, we have to look at. We have a duty, fiduciary duty to. So if you can just elaborate a little bit more on that, would be appreciated.
Certainly. For this fiscal year, for the remainder of FY25, the Secretary did comment on our priorities being some of these de-escalation resources and tools for us to use in training. But we do take the spending of this fund very seriously, and we understand the attractiveness due to the budget shortfall. The Commission reviews the initiatives as they meet quarterly. We continue to reprioritize those needs. Certainly, as legislative session wraps up, there may be new mandates, and we need to reprioritize spending. There are some bills currently pending that we understand will impact that fund, and we will rely on the resources of the fund. As she mentioned, we do have some leadership speakers series that we're hosting at the Public Safety Training Center. We hosted a speaker in November, Captain Mike Abershoff from the Navy. We had a very good response to that, and we do have another well-known nationwide speaker coming in March, scheduled to be here. We've also engaged with larger public safety programs like Force Science to bring programs to our facility and offer that training at no expense to our client agencies. So many of those programs are well received, and these smaller agencies that training budgets have been cut, they rely on these programs being offered. We've also engaged with FLETC for some trauma courses, tactical medic courses that we will have there, which will also include new simulators, mannequins that actually provide hands-on experience for these public safety officers in the training. So those are some large ticket items that we have for planned spending in FY25. And again, we look forward to moving forward with our capital project. If we're not, we will reprioritize again and focus on the Commission's initiatives.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, any further questions? Seeing none, you all have a great day.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. All righty, so we are going to proceed to Department of Juvenile Services. we're going to begin with a DLS analysis by Ms. Miller. When she's ready, she can begin. And then Secretary Schiraldi, after she finishes, you and the team can approach. Great to see you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lewis and committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS budget analysis for the Department of Juvenile Services. In fiscal 26, the department's budget increases by $22.6 million to $369.3 million. Roughly 45% of that growth is attributable to increased personnel costs. Discussion of the department's Managing for Results data begins on page 4 and continues through page 19. This is also a discussion of the youth population that the department is responsible for. The first item relates to crime prevention activities. Though DJS is tasked with supervising youth in the juvenile justice system, in recent years it has also engaged in activities aimed at preventing youths from entering or re-entering that system. Exhibit 1 at the bottom of page 4 and onto page 5 describes entities and programs that receive funds through DJS and are designed to take a community-based approach to preventing youth involvement with the juvenile justice system. These activities include funding the operations of ROCA, administering the Thrive Academy, funding enhanced services for youth, and participating in the Safer, Stronger Together initiative with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. The Safer, Stronger Together initiative was previously referred to as the Community Investment Initiative. Juvenile arrest data is provided in Exhibit 2 on page 6. Total arrests are down 38.6% over the 5-year period, though arrests increased 11.9% between calendar 22 and 23. Arrests and referrals from school resource officers account for over 90% of complaints made to the department. Complaints are written statements that allege a youth has committed one or more delinquent acts or is a runaway, truant, or ungovernable and may be subject to juvenile court dispositions. Other sources of complaints to DJS include transfers from the adult court system, complaints from citizens, and technical violations of probation. Monthly complaints to DJS are shown in Exhibit 3 on page 7. Complaints may also originate as a child in need of supervision petition. The department tends to receive fewer complaints in July, August, and September. DJS received 14,245 complaints in fiscal 2024, a 15% increase compared with 2023. These complaints were for 9,195 distinct youths. After receiving a complaint, a DJS intake officer must make an intake decision. The officer may decide that a complaint is disproved or otherwise resolved, that a youth should be informally diverted from court through a pre-court supervision agreement, or to formally authorize the state's attorney to petition the juvenile court for a hearing. Exhibit 4 on page 9 displays the total number of complaints received by DJS over the past decade and the share of possible dispositions made in each fiscal year. Compared to the 18,906 complaints in fiscal 2019, the last year of pre-pandemic data, the number of complaints in fiscal 24 was 24.7% lower. Approximately 57.8% of cases in fiscal 2024 were either resolved at intake or referred for informal intervention. The 6,065 formal cases accounted for 42.2% of dispositions. Cases of this type rose 41.9% from fiscal 2023, though they remain 17.7% lower than in fiscal 2019. Fiscal 2025 year-to-date data suggests that there could be a decrease in all cases compared with fiscal 24. The change may be overstated, though, as year-to-date data includes July, August, and September, those 3 months that I highlighted with lower overall complaints to the department. Non-residential population trends are shown in Exhibit 5 on page 10. This population includes youth receiving informal supervision, youth on probation, and youth receiving aftercare programming following discharge from a residential program. Between fiscal 2015 and 2022, the non-residential caseload decreased 69.7%. Since fiscal 2022, non-residential caseloads have risen 10.5% to an average daily population of approximately 1,676 youth in fiscal 26. DJS limits the number of youths committed to its facilities by diverting youths to alternatives to detention programs, such as community detention with or without electronic monitoring, evening reporting centers, and by providing shelter care when youth are unable to return home. Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the average daily population for each of these categories in fiscal 2024. The Pre-Adjudication Coordination and Transition Center is a specialized ERC in Baltimore City. For the youth who are detained, Exhibit 7 on page 13 describes the average daily population for youth in detention predisposition, the youth pending placement, and the adult court-authorized detained population. Since overall complaints rose 74.5% between fiscal 21 and 24, and the courts have been fully operational post-pandemic, the detained average daily population rose to 265.2 youth in fiscal 2024. Average daily population is expected to decrease slightly in fiscal 25 as fewer complaints receive formal case dispositions. Based on fiscal 25 year-to-date data, the adult court population now accounts for 61.7% of the detained population, which is the highest proportion since DJS resumed responsibility for this group of youth. Now I'll turn to Exhibit 8 on page 14. Compared to pre-pandemic levels in fiscal 2019, the average length of stay for the predisposition, pending placement, and adult court-authorized populations has increased by 14.6%, 78.2%, and 12.9%, respectively. As average daily population for pending placement youth increased 103.9% between fiscal 22 and 24, average length of stay for that population also increased by 30%. Average length of stay for the adult court authorized youth has also increased since fiscal 2022. In 2024, adult court authorized youth had an average length of stay of approximately 122 days, which was 7.2% higher than in fiscal 22. An exhibit with information related to the department's committed residential population appears on page 16. The committed population continued to fall in fiscal 2022 to approximately 133 youths post-pandemic, but then that has since risen 11.6% in fiscal 2024, with almost all of the growth coming from placements in state-operated facilities. State-operated placements are programs at facilities that are operated and owned by DJS. Even as average daily population rises in fiscal 25, the utilization of state-operated placements remains 29.7% lower than it was in fiscal 2019. Per diem placements are programs operated by private providers, and the state pays for only the number of days that a youth is actually placed in that program. Since fiscal 2015, the private per diem average daily population has fallen by nearly 78% to 158.8 in fiscal 25 year-to-date data. The last topic of the performance data is the department's strategic reentry measures and recidivism. The reentry process is managed by regional reentry teams who oversee each youth's return to their community. After the youth has been in community for 30 days, a DJS reentry specialist follows up with the youth and family to ensure that the youth has accessed all needed services, has successfully enrolled in school, and remains in stable and suitable housing. The outcomes of the follow-up visits are documented and reported to the department as shown in Exhibit 10 on page 18. DJS only reported 3 measures for fiscal 2024 due to insufficient data collection in that year. Of these 3 measures, only one of them showed improvement between 2023 and 2024, and that was the percentage of youth in DJS facilities completing program units in education and workforce, which increased 7.7 percentage points. While strategic reentry plan measures detail efforts to better ease the youth's transition back into their community, recidivism data measures provide a greater understanding of how many youths return to the juvenile justice system. Recidivism data is published in the department's data resource guide, which itself was published on February 1st and not available at the time this analysis was drafted. The Department of Legislative Services asked that DJS comment on why there was insufficient data collection on strategic reentry plan measures in fiscal 2024 for most of its plan measures and whether similar issues will persist. The department should also provide information to the committee today on its rearrest, re-adjudication, and recommitment rates within 1, 2, and 3 years of release from DJS supervision. I'll now turn to a discussion of the department's expenditure in the current fiscal year. The legislative appropriation included $14.6 million to support the operations of the Safer, Stronger Together initiative, the Thrive Academy, and the Enhanced Services Continuum. Cost containment actions approved by the Board of Public Works reduced the department's general fund appropriation by $3 million for these programs. The fiscal 2026 allowance includes 7 proposed deficiencies that add $875,817 in net general funds for the department. $4.8 million will be used to fund overtime expenses for direct care staff. $1.5 million in contractual services and equipment costs will fund security-related IT upgrades. There's an adjustment for personnel costs as a position moves to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. There's a corresponding contractual services costs for that move as well. An $800,000 decrease in contractual services and a $1.5 million decrease in contractual services for residential and non-residential per diem costs based on the youth population in the current year. And then $2.6 million is reduced in contractual services associated with the implementation of the Maryland Total Human Services Integrated Network, also known as MD-Think. MD-Think is the platform that hosts the Child, Juvenile, and Adult Management System, or CJAMS. Critical to the department's operational capabilities is its case management information system. Since calendar 1998, DJS has used a client database referred to as the Automated Statewide System of Information Support Tools, or ASSIST. Previously, CJAMS was expected to replace the case management functions of ASSIST by the end of fiscal 2024, but DJS reports that CJAMS lacked functionalities that its frontline staff require. With the planned deficiency, the fiscal 25 working appropriation and allowance include no funding for replacing ASSIST, and we ask that DJS comment on how its data systems will interact with CJAMS in the future and whether it plans to pursue upgrades or a replacement of ASSIST in upcoming fiscal years. As shown in Exhibit 11 on page 22, approximately 70% of the allowance is for DJS's personnel expenses. Youth programming, including the purchase of care services and youth education programming, accounts for approximately 14% of the allowance, and the remaining 16.5% is allocated to other contractual services, supplies, and equipment-related expenses. Overall, approximately 51.2% of the agency spending goes to its detention and committed treatment facilities. As previously stated, the budget increases by $22.6 million. Exhibit 12, which is going to be on pages 23 and 24, provides additional details on the factors driving this change. I'll highlight that the allowance includes $1.6 million for DJS to replace programmable logic controllers at 3 of its facilities. The allowance also continues funding preventative initiatives, the Enhanced Services Continuum, Safer, Stronger Together, and the Thrive Academy. In fiscal 25, this continuum initially received $7 million, but following BPW cost containment actions, that amount was decreased to $5.6 million. Unlike Safer, Stronger Together, which is a partnership with other departments, and the Thrive Academy, which has been the subject of data of a report already describing its spending plan and success indicators, the Enhanced Services Continuum can be used for broader purposes. In fiscal 26, the Enhanced Services Continuum receives $11.2 million. And given that there has not been time to demonstrate the effectiveness of this program at DJS, especially considering startup delays due to the Board of Public Works reductions, the Department of Legislative Services recommends reducing the general fund appropriation for the Enhanced Services Continuum by $4.2 million to the level previously authorized by the General Assembly in fiscal 25. The budget also grows $3 million to open a facility on the Victor Collins Center campus to serve as an adolescent drug treatment center for youths struggling with substance abuse. This is known as the Catoctin Treatment Center. DJS does not currently operate a similar facility, and the department's 2024 facilities master plan, which was published at the end of calendar 2024, does not describe the facility's condition or include it in its list of proposed projects or recommended actions for the near or long-term future. DLS recommends deleting the general fund appropriation of $3 million to reopen this center due to its absence from the facilities master plan. Personnel data can be found on page 26. There were 227.5 vacancies as of December 31st, approximately 64 above the budgeted turnover rate. Of the vacant positions, 66.5 have been vacant for over a year. And we're asking that DJS comment on the impact of its high vacancy rate, which is above 10%, on agency operations, program outcomes, and youth safety. Pages 27 and 28 include exhibits 13 and 14, which show monthly vacancy rates for community and facility direct care staff, respectively. Vacancy rates for facility direct care staff have fallen from a monthly average of 15.4 down to 4.8% in fiscal 25 year-to-date data, which is quite an improvement. The vacancy rate for community direct care staff has also fallen, where it was 12.8% and now is looking to be 9.2%. The department's overall vacancy rate is lower in fiscal 25 than in 24. The $16.1 million in overtime expenses in the allowance may be insufficient considering recent growth rates in overtime spending. The first issue for the department is on page 29. DJS is the second largest youth placing agency for youth who require an out-of-home placement. Language in the fiscal 25 budget bill restricted $50,000 until the department submitted a report on the wait times that youth receive that they have before they receive a community-based placement, a hospitalization, a family home placement, or a non-community-based placement. In calendar 2024, 355 youth required a placement by DJS, and average length of stay was reported by jurisdiction for calendar 19 through 2024 as requested. The department provided the requested information to the committees, and DLS therefore recommends the release of withheld funds and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised during today's or next week's budget hearings. As discussed in the performance analysis section, average length of stay for detained youth pending placement has increased in recent years. To reduce the amount of time youth spend waiting for placement to residential treatment centers, DJS reports that it has opened 2 pending placement units within the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center and the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center. Youth who are moved to the pending placement units can start to receive their evidence-based therapies so that the time spent waiting in the detention center post-court is better aligned with their treatment service plans. This is also possible due to a lower youth capacity within the detention centers. We ask that in its testimony today that DJS provide the number of youths who have spent time in the pending placement units and discuss how DJS delivers treatment services to these youths. The second issue can be found on page 30. Language in the fiscal 25 budget restricted $100,000 until DJS submitted its facilities master plan, which I mentioned previously. That master's plan contains information about the current and planned capacity of DJS residential programs, a funding proposal for the Maryland Youth Residence and Center renovation and expansion, institutional data about the buildings and sites managed by the department, and inventory information. The submitted FMP is closely aligned with the department's capital improvement plan, which includes $1.15 million in general obligation bond funding this year for the Maryland Youth Residence Center. The department provided the requested report to the committees, and DLS therefore recommends the release of withheld funds and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised. This facilities master plan will also be discussed further in the capital budget analysis for the department. Recommended actions are listed on page 31, and the remaining pages of the report are dedicated to appendices. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Colleagues, any questions? Seeing none, Secretary Schiraldi and team. You all can approach and begin when you are ready.
Mike goes there. start. Good afternoon. Chairman Lewis, Vice Chair Ivy, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here with you today. I, as always, appreciate the work of Ms. Miller and our thorough analysis. DJS remains committed to advancing reforms to enhance public safety, promote fairness, and improve efficiency through direct community engagement. Over the past year, we've strengthened partnerships with local communities to support youth returning home and those receiving services in the community, all in an effort to improve public safety and to improve outcomes for kids in our care. By expanding community-based programming and programs in the facilities, we aim to hold kids accountable while fostering public safety. Our focus remains on reducing recidivism, promoting educational attainment, workforce development, civic engagement, and other positive youth development opportunities that have been shown to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes. Rebuilding our community-based service continuum is a top priority. In the 10 years prior to my arrival, this department returned to the budget $134 million. Those were monies we could have been using to enhance the continuum of care. I have now done visits to every county twice in my 2 years. Every county I go to, they complain that we don't have enough mentoring programs, we don't have enough early prevention programs for kids just entering the system, and we don't have enough programs for deep-end kids. Over and over and over again. I hear that from prosecutors, I hear that from cops, I hear that from judges, I hear that from members of the community. So we've done a bunch of stuff to improve that. I am departing from the script, as you may have noticed. $850,000 federal grant that's just going to help us plan and assess the current continuum. We've done some of that assessment ourselves, but now we're going to use that. Plus, we established a new position of Assistant Secretary for Community Services. We didn't have a high-level position focused on our community services. With that grant, we're going to partner with the University of Maryland, and we're going to go to all of those constituents, ask them what they think our highest needs are for expanding the continuum, what best practices are from our view, what best practices are from their view, and then fill in the continuum of care. Now, while we're doing that, we're not just sitting and waiting for 2 years. You know, I've been here 2 years now. We're not doing nothing. We are enhancing the continuum. Some of that Ms. Miller wrote about. We've added the Thrive Academy. We had a crazy number of kids getting shot and shooting people. I've never seen anything like it. There were 44 kids that shot somebody or were shot in my first year here. Literally one on the first day I arrived. I ran the probation department for New York City for 4 years. We had 30,000 people on my caseload. I didn't have 44 people getting shot or shooting somebody a year. I got 1,400 kids here. So we prioritize gun violence. We started the Thrive Academy. None of the kids on Thrive Academy have been killed. 2% have been shot. 4 out of 5 have not been rearrested for a new gun crime. I wish it was 5 out of 5, but it's 4 out of 5. We did Thrive with our highest risk of gun violence kids in the 4 counties that account for 82% of the gun violence in the state. We're going to have that independently evaluated, but 4 out of 5 kids not getting arrested and 2% getting shot, in my view, is a very good start. But the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Maryland are both going to do independent evaluations of that. That received Council of Juvenile Correctional Administrators Inspiration Innovation Award in 2024. That's essentially the trade association for department heads of juvenile services. In addition to Thrive, we've also expanded some front-end diversion-type programs. There was a lot of complaints that kids were just getting diverted essentially to nothing. And so we transferred money primarily to local management boards, but also to workforce development boards. They're doing early intervention programs, anger management, victim awareness, and then cultural and recreational programs. And then, so that was sort of the front end. The deep end is Thrive. And then in the middle, sort of, if you will, a lot of our kids are interested in working, which is good news. Bad news was we didn't have hardly any slots for employment services for the kids. We had essentially 12 slots. So we began an Office of Workforce Development and started to reach out to various different potential partners that we could partner with to expand vocational programming. And, you know, we've had really good success there. We upped our summer youth employment. We had no summer youth employment slots specific to our kids. We bought 128 through the local management boards through the workforce boards in the various counties. And when we did that, we were able to place 123 kids in those 128 slots, which is pretty good for a brand new program. And now we have 86 year-round slots for kids who are either getting a GED or just done with school. Just by way of, you know, these sound like very small numbers in a 6 million person state, but we only have around 1,400, 1,500 kids on probation or aftercare at any given time, and about 800 of them are 17, 18, 19, and 20 years old. And those are the big target audience for these workforce development jobs, and a bunch of them have their own jobs, so they don't need the additional jobs. So when you're talking about 123 extra jobs, 86 extra jobs, we are now partnering with a variety of different private and public entities for workforce development programming for young people. And what we intend to do there is help the kids either finish high school or get their GED while they're apprenticing in real jobs. So we've talked to Department of Transportation, Department of and Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as the Carpenters Union, Johns Hopkins, and there are some other entities we've spoken with. The Department of Housing and Community Development stepped up first, and so soon we hope to have a program where 17, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds can, if they don't have a high school diploma or GED, can be getting their GED. They can be learning soft skills like how to get to work on time with a good attitude, ready to work from nonprofits, and then apprenticing in paid positions with the Core 2.0 program, which has, I think, $20 million to demolish vacant housing and build new housing. They'll come in as essentially carpenter apprentices, sheetrock, electricity, whatever they do when they build a building. I'm not a building guy, and I'm the juvenile services guy, but this is like one of the things the kids wanted is they wanted these kinds of jobs. That's not going to be for everybody. We're not going to pigeonhole these kids as all carpenters. We're going to work with Do It. We're going to look at Johns Hopkins. They're all open to this conversation, and we want to just use this DHCD program as an entryway for young people to apprenticeships that will help them obtain the kinds of career path jobs that'll help them matriculate out of delinquency. And again, not everybody. Some of them are going to go to college. We'll help them do that too. But the ones that are ready now to go into the workforce, they really don't have a good pathway to do that. And so that's going to be our workforce development program. The Safer, Stronger Together initiative, which was formerly called the Community Investment Initiative, is a collaboration between us, Department of Human Services, and Public Safety and Correctional Services. So the three agencies are partnering together in a really cool collaborative in 3 places so far: Salisbury, Hagerstown, and East Baltimore City. And I promise you, Delegate Lewis, Prince George's County's coming. And so we've launched the sites there. We've worked very closely with, we established community advisory boards, and essentially the conversation is, what will it take in your neighborhood to achieve safety? You live in this neighborhood. We keep coming in as state agencies and helping you, quote unquote, helping you with those answers. But what are your answers? And let's put the money on the table that you all have allocated to us to achieve safety. And that could be safe corridors for kids coming home from recreational activities at night. That could be, let's put a garden where people are now shooting up and breaking bottles. It's going to be what it is in those places. There's actually data attached to all those kinds of things. So in Philadelphia, they literally randomly assigned a whole group of gardens, some of which a whole group of vacant lots, some of which they turned into gardens and some of which they left because they only had a certain amount of money, and crime went down in the areas around where they turned the spots into gardens. So we essentially took all that data and all that information, safe corridor information, helping people with reentry programs. We put it all on the table for the community advisory boards and said, now you pick. You tell us what's going to work in Salisbury and East Baltimore and Hagerstown, because we don't live here. And they're doing that right now, and they're going to, we've issued mini RFPs, not things that take you a year and a half to answer, and those we'll be getting those results during the session. And we're specifically targeting them that people on young people on 2 or more of our caseloads, either my caseload, probation and parole from Department of Public Safety, or DHS caseloads. So families with are touching 2 or more of our caseloads that are between the ages of 13 to 25, which are, high crime periods. Then now I'll talk a little about our residential enhancements. The number of youth pending placement, as was mentioned, and the length of their wait was alarming when I got here. We established a pending placement, 3 pending placement units, 2 at Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center and 1 at Cheltenham. What happens there is, one of the differences between adult and juvenile corrections is if you're an adult and you come in arrested for stealing a car, and the judge ultimately sentences you to a year, but you've waited in jail for 4 months before you get that year, that comes off of the year, right? So now you got a year minus 4 months, minus whatever good time you get to serve. If you're a juvenile and you come in arrested for that same car offense, and you wait 4 months before you get adjudicated delinquent, and then you get placed, which is sentenced to one of our residential facilities, you start at 0. Because you have to go through a rehabilitative program. It's not just about time. So we can't fix all of that because we don't know who's going to get convicted, so we don't know who to start the therapy with. But we can fix it when we know a kid has been convicted, and now they're waiting for their adjudication to occur, and then waiting again for the placement bed to open. So what we did was we started these 3 units to start giving them approximately the level of therapy they're going to get when they ultimately get to Victor Cullen, let's say, or Greenridge or Backbone. So the kids are getting approximately the same number of hours of dialectical behavioral therapy while they're waiting that they will get when they ultimately get there, which ultimately makes their lengths of stay shorter, but their treatment terms just as long, because they didn't just sit around and wait for 46 or 62 days to get into that placement bed. So that's helped us reduce. There were about 61 kids pending placement when we started this effort. Now it's down in the 40s. And importantly, kids are getting therapy sooner. They're not waiting and waiting and waiting. So just a couple more things, and then I'll wrap up and get to the questions and responses. We have expanded a few other things. We've expanded educational programming and reduced idle time, particularly after school time. We've given kids opportunities for off-grounds activities. So on Martin Luther King Day, for example, kids in all of our facilities were out doing community service projects. Not every kid. Some of the kids haven't earned their way to do that. It's a real nice incentive for the young people to behave, because they do want to go off. So they were writing letters to veterans. They were doing care packages for kids in one of the local schools. They were making pillows for people in senior citizen centers all around essentially Western Maryland, where all the facilities are. We've reduced the staff vacancy rates. We reduced the frontline facility rates by 2/3. The staff vacancies are down from January 23 to January 25. And for case managers, probation frontline, it's down 24%. And then we've implemented these innovation teams that work with frontline staff and young people, similar to what we're doing in Salisbury, Hagerstown, and East Baltimore, to find out what's going to make their living situation safer, fewer incidents, and more rehabilitative. And I have to say, the young people take this very seriously. If any of you want to come visit and sit and talk with those young people on those innovation teams, they can tell you how they're setting cultural norms. They're having circles whenever there's a conflict. Instead of just punching each other in the face, they're sitting down and working stuff out. I'm happy to take any of you on a tour if you want to see it. So I think that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Oh, there's one more thing I got, which is, okay, yep, which you, I think, pointed out, Ms. Miller, is that kids being tried as adults now account for 60%, I think it's 61% now, of the detained population. That's an extraordinary population. All of these facilities, they were built for kids to be there a month, right? Because it's just pretrial. Kids should roll through pretty quickly. And in fact, when they are charged as juveniles, they do roll through pretty quickly. The average length of stay for kids in juvenile court is 18 days. The average length of stay for kids being tried as adults is 139 days. So it's an extraordinary amount of time. And then when they get returned to us, which they do 87% of the time, so the overwhelming majority of those kids come back, or they get their cases dismissed by the prosecutors or the courts. So the overwhelming majority of them come back, and then they got that 18 days to resolve their case because all that time in the adult system didn't count. And so that alone cost us $23.7 million last year, just for those kids to spend the difference between 18 days and 139 days. Now to the responses. DJS should comment on why there was insufficient data collection. We've saw this in advance of you. The data collection, I'm not even sure the previous year's data were really accurate. It's a whole nother system separate from assist, and I think it's honored more in the breach than it is in actually people putting that data in. We have a research and case management work group right now, and we will not be having this conversation again next year. We're gonna get people, we can't measure our performance if we don't have good data to measure it with. And right now, I think it's garbage in, garbage out. So I absolutely agree with that. Recidivism rates, thankfully, are down. The last 5 years, it's, if you look at the one-year recommitment rate, it's down from 20% to around 15%. DJS should comment on how its data systems will intersect with CJAMs in the future. So when we got here, the previous administration had spent millions of dollars on CJAMs and MD Think. The field testing we were doing with our case manager's staff is that it really did not meet our needs. It was clunky. It was designed for child welfare cases, not for juvenile cases, and there's a difference. And staff were begging us not to use CJAMs. So we've decided to do a sprint with Do It, which is to really fully examine what our case management needs are. We just got the executive summary for that. We should have the full report soon, and then we're going to work with Do It and DBAM to determine the best path forward to meet our case management needs. But this is a serious issue because the assist system that Ms. Miller mentioned was designed in 1998. I'm not even sure BlackBerrys were designed by 1998, but this system's very old and not very functional. Given that there's not been time to demonstrate the effectiveness of this program, considering startup delays, DLS is recommending that we not have the $4.2 million authorized to the level previously authorized. We oppose this recommendation. We are hearing over and over and over again that the continuum of care needs to be expanded. We are working hard right now to reach out to stakeholders around the state to use best practices to expand that continuum of care. And there is no question in my mind that we need that money for the young people of the state of Maryland and for public safety. DLS recommends deleting the general fund appropriation for the $3 million to open the Catoctin Treatment Center. This is, again, something that judges and prosecutors in particular are asking us for more residential beds. Young people are being sentenced to our correctional facilities right now who actually need drug treatment. Their offenses are not serious enough necessarily to get locked up, but there's no place else to send them, so the judges send them to us, and it's not a good place for drug treatment. We do have the 7 Challenges program, which is an evidence-based program for substance abuse, but it's not for high needs kids. The kids who have high drug and alcohol needs, not that they need drugs, they need therapy, right? they're not being served well, in my view, in our facilities. And prosecutors particularly are like, you guys need drug beds. And so we're not going to run them. We're probably going to contract for them. We're in conversations with MDH about the best way to do this and to help us do a needs analysis. But we will be prepared to open up beds, maybe not in Catoctin. We're not committed to Catoctin. Wherever is the most appropriate place. That could be in a nonprofit. We have an empty facility in Montgomery County. There's a lot of options. But we really do need that $3 million. And if we get it, we will be ready to roll on July 1st. High vacancy rate. The vacancy rate is 10.2% now, and it was 11% when you did your report. I looked at it today. It's 10.2% for our frontline staff. That's 24% lower than it was when I got here. We've had a 69% decline in the number of kids on probation. I think we're okay on that one. I don't think we need more probation officers. I think we need to get that vacancy rate down further. But we're addressing public safety. We have way fewer kids on probation now than we did 10 years ago. We provided the requested information, so you should give us our money. We agree, your money, that is, the money. DJS should provide the number of youths who have spent time in the pending placement units. I went over this a little bit. We have an average of 24 kids. We got about 33 kids in it now, and 351 unique youth went through it during the course of the year because they're in it, and then they go to placement, and they're in it, and they go to placement. They like it, by the way. At first, they didn't like it because they were teenagers and they like to just watch TV all day. But now they're smart teenagers. They figured out, oh, if I start now, I'll be out sooner. I'll get to go home sooner. And if you go to, again, if you want to come to BCJJC or Cheltenham and visit the kids in the unit, you'll see they're qualitatively different than the whole rest of the detention facility, without question. And again, they are receiving approximately the same amount of therapy that they will get when they go to their ultimate treatment facility. And one thing we didn't really think of that's kind of an interesting artifact is because the detention facilities are actually closer to where the kids live, Cheltenham in Prince George's County, BCJJC in Baltimore City, the family therapy component of dialectical behavioral therapy happens with their families sitting right there with them. When they go to Garrett County, to Backbone, that's mostly virtual. Occasionally families come out, but really those facilities that are that far away, the kids don't see their families very much. So we do family therapy, but it's mostly virtual, and frankly, it's not as good. And then one more time, because we did the facility master plan, you recommend we get the money, and we agree. Thank you, and I'll answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you, Secretary Schiraldi. I see one already, so we'll take them in order as folks have. Delegate Stanko.
Thanks for your time today, Secretary. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just as a follow-up, and I don't expect the answer yet, but just for the record for everybody, and forgive me the name changes. Remind me the name of the new program that you're rolling out with the Secretary of Housing for the next level.
It was called Core 2.0, and it's got a new name now. I'll look it up. It's Baltimore something.
Okay, and I know we talked about this just for everyone. One of the concerns that I have with it is making sure that we're on top of individuals looking to be placed, and I understand the businesses have to choose to hire them, right, or government agencies, but that when the juveniles are looking for employment, that we are diligencing the current employees or making sure that there's no affiliation, especially with gangs, that a juvenile would be choosing to select to go to a place that they know a senior, an adult that is a part of organized crime unit is intentional. Yep. So I just want to make sure we get some sort of answer to that as we move forward would be great.
Thank you, Delegate. And you raised this when we talked individually. And I recall, you think your dad used to be part of the gang unit, right?
Yep.
And wasn't part of a gang. He was part of the gang
unit. Right? Yes, gang unit. Exactly.
Yeah. So we circled around with Secretary Day, and we're also circling around with the employers themselves. And we're gonna have this conversation. I actually don't have an answer to it. I think it's a good question.
Yep.
But they will know that they're our kids. So at the very least, they're going to know that these kids are in a delinquency system, and we're going to sort of pair our people who actually kind of know stuff about what gangs they're involved with, and the police to kind of look into that. But we really do, we want to sit down with DHCD, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, and employers themselves to kind of have that conversation.
Understand, appreciate that. And just, I think as we're looking to potentially fund it, I just would like there to be some sort of formal process that with each individual juvenile that the research was done, because it's very easy for that to get like esoterically discussed about up top or here, but then in implementation, it just gets overlooked time and time again. So I don't know how we would handle that from a background check, but from a systems management, there should be an individual case-by-case review of that. And I don't know how we would potentially look at that in legislation, but something that should be thought through. So thank you.
We will get information about how we're going to do that back to the committee for you all. Thank you, delegates.
Thank you. Delegate McCombs, do you have a question? Your eyes said you do, but you didn't press the button.
A while, not for a century, but when I first came into the legislature, there was a real concern about, they loved the Missouri model. Okay. Now, what I'd like to know is, obviously, Maryland's got its own, every state's kind of unique, and Maryland sometimes is more unique than other states. My question is, since this is your life's work, what state do you feel has the best juvenile justice system?
I think the residential programs in Missouri are the best ones in the country, in my view. They've fallen off a little bit, but I do think they're the best ones in the country. We sent our staff to view the Missouri program since I've been here, and one of the people who used to head that system has been coaching us as we do our innovations process that I talk about. So some of the elements are to engage the front, a lot of times when you get to be a department head, you think you're the smartest kid in the room. And so we sit up in our offices and we design stuff that then has to be implemented, on the ground. So in Missouri and now here, we are sitting with the staff and co-designing what should happen on those units. What happens when a kid takes a swing at another kid or at a staff member? What happens when kids won't engage? How do we, as a group, help the kids get through the developmental milestones that they need to get through, that all of our kids are getting through because they're having experiences out in the community, and too often when the kids are in custody, they don't get through. That's really, in my view, the secret sauce of Missouri, is that kids are actually engaged in thinking through their own success in their living units. We are doing that here. We're not calling it the Missouri model because I want us to have ownership over what we do, and sometimes people are like, that's Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, we're Baltimore, we don't have those kids here. There's all of that pushback, but we're engaged and pulling in many of the elements of the Missouri model, absolutely. And I think they're the best in custody. Community stuff,
kids are funny. They like certain things, okay? And so my concern is are they fully vetted before they decide to go into whatever type of work projects? Because you hear that some of the kids live in areas where the guy that has the gold chains and the fancy cars and stealing drugs, and they don't see that there's a bad side of that. They see that, oh, this guy's a success, and their little brains aren't totally formed. Mm-hmm. So the thing is how are you countering that kind of thing? Because I've talked to some other folks that have different experiences, and they said that is a real issue for children that deal in some of those areas. That they see this guy has success, and maybe their mom works at a clerical job, or she's housekeeper. She does housekeeping or something, and so they think this guy can make money really quick. And my mom's been struggling for years, or my dad, works for maybe the government, but it's he's not getting a big 6-figure or 7-figure income. So that's an issue. How do you deal with that? Because you're fighting that. Yeah, no, good, great question. There's a number of ways we're doing it. One of them is, so remember, we got 14, 15 workforce development people that are exposing them to different possibilities, different workforce possibilities, and our juvenile services education program, which this body set up, that now runs our school system. It's not Maryland State Department of Education anymore, it's its own school. They've brought on vocational education people there,
And that is primarily, it's not going to teach a kid how to be an HVAC person or a coder or a chef. It's exposing them to a variety of possibilities. On a community side, pretty much same thing. We're starting to show them the various options. We're actually talking to them about what the market is calling for. So it's not just, I want to do X. It's, this is where the jobs are. And I found the conversations are kind of interesting. If all you got when you step out your front door is the guy with the gold chains, more than not, you're going to go to the guy with the gold chains, right? But if there's a whole bunch of other options, the young people get the fact that there's danger involved in it. They see it. I mean, they've had brothers and, you know, uncles and friends killed. And they know that this is not a non-dangerous occupation. So yeah, there's attractive stuff to it, but they get the downside too. They just don't have a lot of other options. And so, in my opinion, a lot of my job is to get them those options so there's at least a realistic pathway to something else when they want to make that choice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No worries. I will, I'm about to go to the vice chair, but I would encourage my colleagues in all your spare free time to consider reading a book called Bleeding Out by Thomas Abt. Bleeding Out by Thomas Abt. It is a very informative, it's not partisan at all. It is evidence-based strategies to address particularly, you know, urban violence related to shooters specifically in the neighborhoods and how people get in. I would encourage my colleagues to. I wouldn't even mind, matter of fact, I will go further. I will buy the book for everybody and send it to your offices. And yeah, so I will say that. Thank you guys for your questions. All right, Vice Chair Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the book as well. I think it's important for all of us to read and to do research on these topics here. You know, being a member of this committee, it was something new for me to learn about the various programs that the different agencies run. Before I get into it, I want to commend you for the work that you've been doing and for your leadership. It's a very tough job, and I appreciate your transparency and your willingness to come forward and have these very candid conversations with us. I know last year we talked about bringing the Thrive Academy to Prince George's County, and I want to thank you for following through on that. You know, there are different agencies that are more resistant to taking suggestions like those, so I do just want to say thank you for that. I have two pretty small questions actually for you. I was reading through and it says that some of the operating funds for the Thrive Academy come from like private philanthropy. Could you speak to that? Like what sort of number are we speaking on coming from private entities?
Sure. There's a foundation called the Pull-Up Fund that only funds in Prince George's County and Maine.
Wow.
And they funded our initiation of Thrive in Prince George's County. It was $780,000, I believe. And then they also put in additional funds to fund the research by the University of Pennsylvania. We're eating that money up now, and then the money you gave us will just continue to Prince George's Thrive, and we'll expand it. We're expanding Thrive to a different population soon. Right now, it's focused specifically on gun violence.
Yeah.
We also score kids on our caseload for risk, low, medium, high. And we have kids on high risk that are actually doing fine, but some kids on high risk are struggling, and we didn't really have another notch in our belt to help them. So Thrive will now be applied to them in the 4 original counties, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Prince George's, and Anne Arundel. And we're expanding both Thrive and what we call Thrive Passport statewide.
Wonderful. I look forward to continuing to receive updates on that. One of the things I was also looking for was just a jurisdictional breakdown of the data that you've provided. Yeah, of course, we're all state delegates, but we come from our various jurisdictions. So when you get the chance, if you could give that to the committee, I'd really appreciate that.
Which specific data do you want broken down?
Well, there's a whole lot of data here, juvenile arrests and complaint trends, so on and so forth. Want to be able to look at, the investments that we've been making and to see the actual trend in these various jurisdictions. So
Absolutely, we'll get you that.
And I'm sure that you might even have ideas of other data that we'd be curious about. So, whatever you think beyond those specific pieces of information, I think it'd be really helpful.
Great, will do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No worries. As we were making our way around the state, Western Maryland, Delegate Schindler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys very much for all the work that you do. I know especially in Western Maryland, you guys have a very big presence. The question I have for you is, you had mentioned that new collaborative program that's being, piloted in East Salisbury and Hagerstown. And you said that data will be available during session, the recommendations from the community. When did you happen to mention when that exactly was going to be available? Or?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll get it to you.
Okay, and once you have that, would you mind sharing that with the committee, the recommendations that came back from the community and kind of what's going to be implemented on that program?
Not at all, and also, we meet regularly with the Community Advisory Board, so we'll let you know when the next one is if you want to come.
Thank you very much.
The mayor, the outgoing mayor came. She was actually at the facility she used to work at. With some community organization. That's where we meet with the group.
I appreciate that.
Hagerstown Mayor, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple things. Thank you all for the testimony. First, I want to say I commend you for establishing the Assistant Secretary for Community Services. I think the whole approach of identifying that you all have clients that come from certain places and those communities need support and relationship is a great shift to just being reactionary once people come. And as I stated last year, the approach of communicating with DHS and corrections and whatnot, we know where these neighborhoods are. We have a lot of data to suggest it, right? And if we can connect, particularly with these young people before they are in the care of the state in some capacity, not only do we put them on a pathway to be more productive members of society, but frankly, we also, given this budget circumstance, we spend less long-term, right? You reference, and I think this is written, I just wanted it to be stated on the record, 82% of the gun violence, based on the data, has come from 4 counties. Can you state where those 4 counties are?
Yeah, it's Baltimore City, Prince George's, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore County.
Yep.
Prince George's is in second place.
Yeah. So I know we're working and communicating a lot on how we can continue to address that. There's been a decline in homicides in Baltimore City. Was very happy to see that. Those of us in the Washington suburbs watch DC too. There's been a decline there. We're still working on that in Prince George's County, so I appreciate your partnership. On the vocational programming for some of the programs you have, I know you are establishing Office of Workforce Development. Are you connecting directly with the workforce development programs in each of the counties, like Employ Prince George's and whatnot? Okay. Yeah. Because at least in my county's case, we have a division focused on that, and I think they're pretty good. I don't know the quality of each of the counties' programs, but if we need to support them in being able to appropriately interface with you, I don't mind helping with that as well.
Thank you.
And the last thing I'll say, time depending, we might want to schedule during the interim, some type of interaction for the committee to come see some of these programs.
That'd be great.
Hopefully it will be helpful for our presence and less of a stress. But I, for one, coming from my district, and I know my district, we have a number of your clients. I would welcome the opportunity to see particularly on a number of these young folks.
Yeah, Baltimore's Mayor Scott and Chief Worley are touring our electronic monitoring headquarters, and we'll be meeting when they get there with a bunch of our community providers in Baltimore. We're happy to arrange those kinds of things in other counties.
Yeah.
We have given a bunch of facility tours to delegates. We think the more you all know about what we're doing, the better it is. And sometimes what you know won't be always good news. Yeah, but we're
part of the
trying to
work,
fix it. Yep.
You know, that's the only way you can improve things, right? It's through knowledge. I do have to ask, so some of my colleagues asked me to ask you about fentanyl. So particularly in some of the young people in the counties, particularly Montgomery County, and some others are seeing a rise of young people using fentanyl. And I know this is an area of concern for you guys. So I know you have a facility that you guys own there. We were talking about Catoctin a little bit. Can you just talk about any collaboration you all are tracking this, I guess, rise of fentanyl among young people that may end up entering your facilities and any strategy around that?
Sure thing. About 70 kids come into our facilities as residential facilities each year for the last 2 years with what we call high needs in the drug and alcohol problem areas. The primary locations for them is Montgomery County is number one both years, and a lot of that is fentanyl, and that is, our kids are wildly disproportionately Black. And second is Latino, but in the high needs drug area, the Latinos are actually overrepresented versus their representation in the rest of the population. We, in Baltimore City and Prince George's are the next two, and they're pretty close to one another. But Montgomery stands out. Montgomery also stands out because they don't commit a lot of kids as a general rule. So the fact that they have the number one, number 4 high drug needs means a pretty high proportion of the overall kids they commit have high drug needs. So we have various options. We have an empty facility, Catoctin, that was a drug treatment program until 2019. I don't know why it was closed. Then we have this empty facility in Rockville called the Alfred Noyes Center. It used to be a girls' facility. It's in pretty good shape, and it's sitting empty. It's a little correctional for a drug treatment program. It feels a little more like a prison than a treatment program, but that's just a matter of cosmetic stuff. It's not, it's physically sound. And then some of the drug treatment providers themselves have empty beds. So I don't know what's the best. You know, I know that Ms. Miller said in here that it wasn't in our facility master plan. We might not be running it. We almost certainly won't be running it. You know, we're going to bring people in who are experts in that, but we're going to talk to MDH because they're the expert cabinet level secretary, and then we'll come up with a decision, and we'll have that decision ready to be implemented if it's in our budget, if the mean Miss Miller who tried to take it away from us doesn't take it away from us.
Well, I appreciate that part. Obviously, you know, as this committee, we are focused, particularly in this conversation, on the needs of, you know, our young people, our juveniles across the state. And if there are certain areas that are spiking, we'd love to collaborate with you on that. Any further questions, colleagues? Seeing none, thank you. Secretary and team, I know we do have 2 more individuals, I believe, who are here to testify. Ms. Park from the Maryland Association of Youth Service Bureaus, along with Ms. Henderson from AFSCME, Local 3167. Okay. You can come and start when you're ready. Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and Subcommittee, for allowing me to speak. Liz Park from the Maryland Association of Youth Service Bureaus. Many of you have heard about us for years. We are in Comar as part of Juvenile Services. We are the front end that we were hearing about. Our mission is to keep kids from going into the system. Over the many years I've been with Youth Service Bureaus, a little bit over 20 years, the funding, the state funding has declined. We went from being 21 bureaus across the state receiving state funding to currently today just 5 receive state funding to support these efforts. There's still about another handful that receive some local government, either municipal or county government funds that have allowed those services to continue. So as you heard, that need for the continuum, how do we keep kids from going into the system? How do we catch them when they're having trouble at school, when their parents are noticing the difficulty? How do we capture them then, get them the family therapy, the services? We do many programs like GED programs, parenting classes, life skills classes, tutoring services, so a variety of services to help these young people be successful and not go into the juvenile justice system. So we're here to support the budget that DJS has been proposed. We support their efforts and all the things they're doing to increase the services they're offering to kids. And just asking that there be some consideration for funding for youth service bureaus so that we can reinvigorate that continuum. There used to be bureaus on the Eastern Shore in Cambridge, in Anne Arundel County here. There's still 5 in Prince George's. There was ones in Montgomery County. There's still one in Carroll County. There's only one. There used to be 3 in the city, in Baltimore City, and there's one, and there used to be 3 in Baltimore County. There was one down in Tri-County for Charles, St. Mary's, and Calvert. And so if those agencies were still in place, we can only imagine the numbers of kids that wouldn't have gone into this, the system. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Park. Any questions? Delegate McComas.
I just wondered, do you, it seems like the PTAs are not as robust as they were before, and I was just wondering if you kind of connect with them, the ones that are robust.
That are robust. Right. So we are all connected with our schools, doing programs in the schools, or getting a majority of our referrals come from the school system. In terms of PTAs, we certainly, I have worked with, I'm the director over in Greenbelt, so I have worked with the schools, the principals, the PTAs. When we're recruiting, you know, we're offering parenting classes, services, and making sure they know that they can bring their children to us when they're seeing signs of distress.
Any further questions, colleagues? Thank you so much for what you do, and thanks for coming out. I think that's everyone we had to testify for today. Thank you all for your attention. I know the conversation is going to continue. And with that, our hearing is adjourned. Have a great day.